All right, thank you guys. Really appreciate having me here. This is a topic pretty near and dear to my heart. So the title is a little odd, but El Salvador is the smallest country in the Americas, and if you read stuff like Jared Diamond or any kind of sociologist, they like to study small places because those places go to collapse sooner, and hopefully they don't go all the way to collapse, but you can also study them and kind of learn root things that you can bring elsewhere, right? And so this is sort of my story here. Um, okay, all right, great. So a little bit of just who I am. I was born in El Salvador. Lived in kind of a subsistence farming community. Let's see. Lived in an adobe house, picked mangoes, avocados, all sorts of fruit as I walked along. So it's kind of a natural food forest. That's just I don't remember going home for lunch often. It was just, picking whatever was around. And then I was also the son of a revolutionary. My father was the first person to go to high school out of his village, first one to go to college, first one to get a double PhD, and the first one to become the Attorney General of the poor of El Salvador. So he sort of came from literally nothing and became one of the most sort of powerful people in the country. And that sort of really has sort of set my, I guess, the path that I'd like to follow. Then we came to the States because of this sort of revolutionary tint that my father had. He got a call from a friend of his one day when he was at his office and said, if you go out the front door, they're going to kill you. I suggest you go out the back door. And so he did, luckily, and he went off first. Then the next day I was woken up at 5 by my mom, and she just said, leave a note for the neighbor, because he was like my best friend. You'll probably never see him, and we got to go. So we kind of packed up our lives in a couple of those kind of really bad suitcases where they didn't have the cool wheels back then, and came to San Jose, California. My mom had gone back and forth to San Francisco with her father. He was kind of a salesman of all kinds, so he would kind of pick up Ginsu knives over here and go to El Salvador and then kind of bring something back from there. So she had been living in these two worlds most of her life, and we had family in the Bay Area. So we went up there, but it was kind of I kind of became fairly Americanized, if you will. I had a Huffy bike, a ColecoVision game console, and I loved Chuck E. Cheese, so I was kind of all-around American kid for a while. Then I was always good at math, and everyone had always said, oh, you should be an engineer. So I did mechanical engineering at San Jose State. Then I went to software because I thought, I kind of want to live where I want to live, and mechanical tended to be very physical. And so I went to software, and that has allowed me to live in San Luis Obispo. And I built out stuff like CNN's iReport. And that was really a fun project because it was this very sort of slightly revolutionary, let's make sure that anyone can actually publish news at the same level of an organization. And in El Salvador, the press was controlled by the oligarchy. So it was like the idea of having any Joe Schmo write up or do a story about something, could be recycling or reuse, and publish it in the same place that, the people of power have. It was just fascinating to me. And so that's always been a passion of mine, sort of community engineering, I call it. And so I spent a long time sort of in the online community and did stuff in gaming and stuff for a while. But really, it's sort of coming back to, all right, how do we apply these lessons, and how do we actually bring real people together, community, and use these tools, which are amazing, but really kind of recreate communities, because we've sort of lost that. Being a father, I have 2 kids, 5 and 8. That's probably really kind of centered me back into this path, if you will. And lately, I've been playing a lot with this whole cultural creative concept, which is, the things we've had, the culture we've had, hasn't necessarily served us. So how do we rebuild it? How do we redesign it? Right? How are we intentionally going to go build something that we really want to live in? And things like permaculture, I think, have really. I'm a design engineer, so something like permaculture really makes me like, oh, very cool. These are nice tools for design. So that gets me excited. Things like nature connection. Again, I grew up, picking mangoes out of the tree, and I think that was really fundamental for me in terms of, we can talk about recycling, reuse, and all that, but unless you really love the land you're on and the trees around you, then it's really, really hard to get that ethic. So I think that nature connection is huge. And lately I've been playing a lot with sort of rites of passage and just, how do we help children become adults in useful parts of the community. So a little bit about me. You can also sort of break it down by my DNA. I recently did a 23andMe, breaks down like components of where where your genes are from. 30% or so Native American, and then the rest sort of a European mix. And this was kind of interesting. My mother's DNA came from Siberia at some point, about 40,000 years ago, and then sort of came over Bering Strait and down to El Salvador. So the thing that makes me think is we're this just mix of people now. And we gotta, but it's important not to necessarily just blend it all together, but find those key things in each one of these things that come from us and sort of build something better. Okay, so why should we care about El Salvador? I mentioned the smallest country in the Americas. It's the fourth most sensitive. We got the great nomination of being the fourth most sensitive to climate change. It's a small country. When a hurricane comes over there, it kind of covers the whole country. There's no like leaving the country or leaving, and then it's also, we've got both Caribbean and the Pacific Ocean, and instead of like going inland and then sort of hitting high pressure and going back out, it just kind of sits there and goes back and forth. So there's just been some amazing torrential rains that just wash away all the topsoil in like one hurricane. So there's also been an interesting thing. We had a 12-year civil war. My dad was involved in that. And the sort of revolutionary group became a political party. And just recently, about 4 years ago now, a person from that party became president. So it's the first time in 500 years where you've sort of had a more people-friendly government in El Salvador. And they're trying to figure out, it's been a little bit like the Obama thing. In a way, he ran on revolution. And it hasn't changed that much, but at least the tone has changed. And the government's sort of trying to figure out where it sits, what policies are going to work for it. And I think that's where, for me, things like permaculture and seeing some stuff going on there could be actually enacted as a more policy-wide thing, and that could be really interesting. There's been, 500 years of a culture of extraction. The ancestral cultures are still really strong. It's just they need a little help sort of getting back to that or appreciating what they had. I've noticed a lot of my family that's moved here. They're amazing people and just, I just love them to death. And then their children end up being fairly disconnected and nothing like, the culture they came from. And I've been studying like why, this group stayed and stayed really tight and this group left and became this kind of disjointed group. So, what are these little things that we're not appreciating enough to keep together? And one of the interesting things about El Salvador is there's a lot of thought now that a lot of like the early Mayan culture came from there and sort of moved up into Guatemala and further up Mesoamerica. And there's a number of places called Teosinte, which is what corn was domesticated from. So there's a good possibility that it's like the breadbasket of the Americas. This is where 10,000 years ago, corn was domesticated. So just to give you an idea, California, and then El Salvador. Population in California, 230 people per square mile. El Salvador, 762, so a little more dense. And California has about 20 times the land. This is one of my favorite places. It's a volcanic eruption that happened. It's a lot like Pompeii. Ash came down and actually completely preserved this Mayan village. And the neat thing was it wasn't necessarily a ceremonial village. It was a village where people really lived. And so you can see things like right here is where they're growing their corn, beans, and squash. And they even had like ash had built around the three sisters, so the squash, the beans, and so they sort of filled it in, and you could see like the actual corn stalk and stuff. And the spacing that was used then, which was is the same we use now, sort of in industrial corn. The group cow and other things like that. This is a temescal, it's called. It's a sweat lodge basically, but it's a more permanent one made out of adobe and stuff. So it's really fun to see a lot of the cultural elements we see in like Native American cultures. Really, also this was a good root of that too. So some more history. 1522, Spanish came. There was a lot of different native cultures in El Salvador. It's kind of like where the whole Americas kind of tapers down. And so you get a lot of different cultures that had learned to coexist without really fighting, because everyone had to go through there to do trade. And so it was a very sort of, especially the Lenca were really interesting. They had more like an Iroquois confederacy, and women were the only ones that were allowed to sort of declare war. They absorbed, wouldn't that be great? yeah. And they did things like, instead of like an empire where you take over another culture and you strip them out, they really had this mechanism for absorbing a new culture and just kind of having them be part of the government. And it was a really neat way to like live together in groups, but still create a larger subsystem above it. So the Spanish came, and they were a little bit, they had this big, a really strong fight, one of the strongest they had in the Americas. And some people say that they could have possibly not won the last sort of battle, because a woman who was the chief of the Lenca, who really gathered all these people together, she was pregnant, and she was fighting the Spanish. And then she had to have her baby, so she went to an island in a lake. And because she was gone, there was a little power vacuum there, and then it sort of allowed a hole in the line, if you will. So, all right, so the Spanish were disappointed. They won, and they said, oh, we don't have gold. But, this land is fertile. They didn't really want, a lot of people didn't want to immigrate there because there was no gold. And so they just divvied the whole country up into really large blocks. So, and those large blocks, till this day, we have a thing called the 14 families, which are kind of the oligarchy. They pretty much own, 14 families pretty much own the whole country. So a little, we think about the 99%, this is more like the 99.9999. So this obviously created problems. They kind of pushed monocultures, and a lot of it was export focused, right? So they wanted to just pull stuff out. They were mining the land. And food security and food became a big issue. People would starve during certain things. And so that obviously creates a problem. So in the 30s, the oligarchy had sort of chosen coffee. We were kind of considered the coffee republic. And Great Depression happened, prices dropped. People were sort of not given money or food or even land to grow stuff on. They just kind of wanted to let the land sit fallow if they couldn't grow coffee, but people were starving. So there was an uprising. This sort of native leader kind of just was pushing for property rights and fair wages. And the oligarchy came down just incredibly, like one of the worst in the Americas. About 30,000 people were killed in less than a month. The worst part was they invited everyone. They said, all right, let's have negotiations. And they invited everyone to the town plaza and then just sort of mowed everybody down. And so this sort of extractive mentality that's like people aren't really people, they're just kind of slaves. So, and another thing is because most of the people are indigenous, they just kind of went after anyone who looked indigenous, who did their traditions. It gets a little better, sorry. This is like the hard part. So they really just kind of crushed that. And even in my family, if I ask them, do we have any indigenous past, or they're just kind of like, oh, no, we're French. Have you looked at yourself lately? I saw Amelie, so we don't look like it. So it was just this big crushing of this, and this is just an artist that shows a Papua woman, and when an infant had died, they would put breast milk in a bamboo and kind of bury it. So this is like the burial rite. And then behind is a lot of the peasants. This is a picture they took before they were executed. And so it's something that it's this kind of pent up grief that the country had in the 30s. And this, until recently, was people are finally talking about it. It was just not, it was erased from the history books. Most people don't know about it. And so, but these are things that, not doing some of the permaculture things, this is what happens. So when you don't care about people, when you don't have a fair share, when you don't care about the earth because you're exporting everything. So in a sense for me, that really instills that permaculture philosophy. My family lived in this river valley, the Rio Lempa, and the industrialists sort of decided they wanted to put a large dam that would probably displace about 25,000 people. So my family was part of that. An interesting priest, Father Alice, kind of started this whole, I don't know if you guys have heard of liberation theology. It's a kind of a more humane Catholicism, Christianity that really became kind of slightly revolutionary, because they were just saying, if we really follow the gospel and the word of Jesus, then it's really like a revolutionary, right? And so they were really involved politically, which was kind of new for the Catholic Church. They tended to be, they would do all the rituals for the super rich, and they were funded by them. And so it was a really big shift, and it caused a lot of turmoil. And this happened in this village because of this dam kind of building. And so this priest helped my family move. He got some foreign money and started like a permaculture farm. This was in the 70s. They were kind of doing their own food. They were doing their own fertilizer, and they weren't buying as much. And then all the other villages started seeing them. They were like, "Wow, the Mormons are doing a really cool thing. Let's try it out." And soon, a lot of the little villages were doing it, and the people that owned everything were kind of like, "This isn't good. We've got socialism happening here." And so they went to the village with some army folks, and they said, "There's some rebels up in the hills. We're going to kind of do some activity up here. We need you guys to move." This is all of the village elders, my great uncles, I guess. And they rounded them up and killed about 40 or 50 of them. And they used their own tractor to build a mass grave and buried it. And so I had known some of this history, and I had bought this book about 8 years ago on a visit. And then my uncle told me the story about 2 years ago about this. And I happened to look at my bookcase, and I went, "Oh." I said, "Oh, that's that father." And then he kind of describes in this book this history of kind of the moving from the river and stuff like that. And it was kind of a weird connection. And along with that, I visited this permaculture institute in my hometown, because that's a dream I've had of doing there. And I saw that there was already one. And I went, "Oh, great." And it happened to be in the same place that the village that my family had built. So it was this weird, kind of coincidence. And so I just kind of walked in and I said, "How can I help you? This is you built what I wanted to build, and I have such a connection with you." And so their main thing has been they lost one of their funders, and they needed help sort of meeting the, paying their instructors and stuff. And so we did a little fundraiser for them with my family and raised about $5,000 a year ago, and that kept them going. And so they're at that phase again where they're like, "Okay, we need a little more help again." So that's kind of why I've been out kind of speaking. You guys probably already know most of permaculture. Obviously, colonialism is not permaculture. Yeah, we're running out here. Let me just go. So, comedic break. This is my aunt. We were walking to the old village, and she said, "Oh, look, it's running water. This is the way I would get water to our house." She put it on her head, walked down this hill, down to the lake, or the spring by the lake, and bring it back up. And then she said, "Oh, this is jungle toilet paper." So but she said, "Don't pick the wrong leaf, because there's a leaf. There's a leaf that's called quemamano." And I was like, "Quemamano means burn your hand." And she said, "If you wait for that one, you'll be screaming for days." So I found this permaculture institute, and they've been there about 10 years. And I was kind of asking him, what were your challenges? And he said, because of this culture of extraction, food security was not really important. 95% of the food for El Salvador is imported, which is completely ridiculous. Small-scale agriculture has been forgotten. A lot of the people left the villages because of the war, and then went to the big cities. And then the younger kids are going back out, but they don't know how to farm. And foreign aid's coming in, and they're saying, we'll give you some money, but here's your Monsanto bag of seed, and here's your pesticide. And so it's kind of like not the right way. And because it's so small, right away the rivers are polluted, algae blooms, and all those things. But you see it like countrywide, so in a sense, it's kind of easier to go, there's a problem here. And so people are starting to be more aware, just trying to figure out how to do it better. So they started this Permaculture Institute. They started off more with a PDC-like thing where people come for 2 or 3 weeks, and it kind of failed because people, first of all, didn't have the bus money to get to the site. And then, 2 to 3 weeks, and then you're off on your own. It didn't really work. So what they started doing was more like a monthly meeting, and they used the money that they got to basically pay for the farmers to come out. And they also made the farmers commit to experiment in their community. So whatever they learned, they would go back, experiment, come back, and kind of do that throughout the year. And it's a lot like the permaculture course that's happening in SO. So I was really kind of excited to see that method. And they call it farmer to farmer. They're just, instead of having like the expert necessarily come in, they're just kind of working together. They have a network of people really trying to make this work and pick appropriate technologies for their villages. Some of the things in the course. So when I was there, these are some of the pictures I took. They had great like rainwater catchment off the roofs, and they built a little cistern there. Because they were saying, we have the shopping malls next door, and they've got a fountain of water spewing, and the people in the village don't have any water. And so, and when it dumps, it dumps. So you can get a good amount of water, but it usually just runs off pretty quick. Right there. So, and I said, why doesn't the city do more of this? Oh, well, it doesn't have a big contractor, to do the project, and so, the government's not necessarily all that excited about teaching people to do things on their own anyway. They also did a lot of seed saving. Like I said, El Salvador has just an incredible variety of seed that was being lost, and so they're trying to preserve it. They even had to go to different communities in Guatemala to get particular varieties that had been lost. And so they're creating little seed banks, which are fantastic. Teaching about rocket stoves. People can spend 3 or 4 hours gathering wood. Everyone cooks over wood fires. And so having something like a rocket stove can really help. So they're kind of teaching that a little bit. But natural fertilizer is probably one of the biggest things, I think, because like I said, people are just giving them really, really cheap industrial fertilizers and pesticides, and that seems to make sense to them because it's a little bit cheaper. But over the long term, their soil gets kind of messed up. So, so they're teaching people how to make their own. It's a little bit harder, but they're seeing really good yields, and so they're creating little studies and showing people how to do it. They also figured out that the big grocery stores didn't want to buy excess from them, so they created a little farmers market. They also did their own currency, I was like, wow, you guys are like a transition tile. This is pretty amazing. And I think the key thing is, I know sometimes when we do these things, right, they're not because we need to. They're because we kind of feel like we should, but they kind of need to. And we see it in the passion they have, and they're just so excited about what they're working on. And it sort of motivates me for sure. This was a little permaculture design they did for their site. So they've done more now, but they had about 40 leaders in 14 different communities. And when I came, a bunch of people came to meet me, and one guy was like, yeah, I got up at like 5 to get on the bus for 2 hours to come see you. And I was like, geez. And so people are coming from all over. The director, she takes the bus for an hour at least every day to get there. So people are very committed, and they're really creating really great collaborations with different ecological groups. The site's about 20 acres, almost no capital. It's very hilly, and so which is El Salvador's land of volcanoes, so everything's kind of at an angle. And what they, the Industrial Green Revolution way has been clear all the trees and plant, and then that hurricane comes and they're left with lava rock at the bottom. And so they're really training a lot more in sort of food forests and keeping your rocks in place, is really important. Kind of no-till. So corn you can plant with a hole and you drop in the seed. You close it. You don't have to do it like wheat where you have to spin the whole soil around. They've received a lot of interest from NGOs, and even like the UN came, and but they have a hard time wrapping their head around sort of like permaculture is what? Like if you have a project like wood stoves, all right, you can get money for that. If you have a project for water wells in the community, you get money for that. But when you say, we're going to teach people to design the appropriate thing for their community, it's really a lot harder to get some backing behind it. So that's I've been trying to get out and try to make a little more sense of it for folks. Some results they've had is they're not using slash and burn. 95% of the families that have been exposed. Other farmers are copying. They're not doing monocrops. They're starting to use organic farming techniques. They've seen increases in their corn crops, 75% reduction in herbicides, and increase in topsoils in some areas where they were just losing 2 to 3 inches a year in hurricane areas. And, on average, in some folks, $484 are saved a year on agrochemicals. And that's for an average family income is about $1,300 a year. So that's quite a savings for people. So that's you can send your kids to school, stuff like that. So the ask is sort of donations, sister organization support. They take people, especially if you guys have college friends or it's just such a great experience to go down there and see this community that's just really trying to make it work and really needs to make it work. So that's it. Yes.
Is your family safe to go back now?
Yeah. It really, the last 5 years, I would say, there was a point where one time my dad, about 15 years ago, was flying to Mexico and he got rerouted to El Salvador, and he was with my sister. And he just basically wrote her a note, here are my friends. They're probably going to pull me off the plane if we land here. And I love you. And yeah. So there was a point where it was his name was very well known. And but yeah, now it's not so big. Yes?
Are you involved with Rotary Club and
I know I have a couple friends that are, and I've sort of sent them the information. And then the Interact Club, actually, you guys mentioned it at Mission High. Mm-hmm. They're doing one of the girls there runs it's called Art for Change, and they do like a little auction. And so she's committed to donate the proceeds from that to the institute. So we're bringing up some seeds and some art from the institute and auctioning those off. Yes.
So when you're talking about natural fertilizers, you're talking about composting, right?
Mm-hmm. Pretty much, yeah.
And what do they do with their human waste?
Yeah, so they do composting toilets. I thought I had a picture of it. Sorry. So they just do the diversion of the pee and the poo, and then they have that long channel kind of thing, and cycle it out in chambers, kind of.
So they're composting from their animals and then their own.
Yeah, trying to think how much they use it. They made it on site when I was there. I think they were mainly using animal for the compost that they were building, but I think they have specific areas where they use a human urine. And yeah, it was great. Like nothing is wasted on this. You know, if you wash your dishes, it goes in a little slot down, and they have particular plants, like banana plants, are really good at this, at absorbing soapy, materials. And yeah, I mean the fauna is just amazing because it's tropical, so these amazing things grow there. They're growing a lot of amaranth also, because of this monoculture mentality, people have just grown corn. And so getting them used to different sort of more traditional grains or different things has been is one of their charters, and making sure people use different corn instead of just the GMO kind of stuff.
What about like tools, like shovels and stuff like that, machetes and stuff?
Yeah,
Do they have a need for that as well?
I mean they definitely use it. I mean pretty much everyone. If I were at El Salvador right now, I'd probably have a little machete on my side here. So yeah, I mean it's a lot of that can be made there or is made there, so it's not too expensive. So, but yeah, I mean anything for sure helps.
When's the next time you're going back?
I'm hoping to go this summer. My kids are off in the summer, so my goal is to, because I can work from anywhere in a way, is to go down there and work for somewhere and have them at least experience that more.
What sort of animals you see in the U.S.?
So for farming or for actually not. I mean, you see sort of water buffalo-ish with what's it called, the yolk and a thing, but
With chickens and pigs.
chickens, pigs. Yeah, they've been doing a lot with rabbits lately, just to have a little extra meat. Their diet's mainly vegetarian on this particular farm, and then they do a little bit with rabbits and chickens.
What sort of rainfall do you get? Like on that?
Yeah, I'd have to. I mean, God, sometimes you're walking along, and then there's a river, there's a flood all of a sudden in the middle of the street.
There's plenty of water.
There's plenty of water; it just runs off too quickly. Yeah, and the soil's volcanic, so if it goes, it just drains out quick.
And you probably do have soil food, anything if you have so the soil's washed away and you're left with rock and you reapply compost and when it rains it's still
Right. Yeah, and I've been interested a little bit in biochar a little bit, just because it helps sort of keep some of that moisture in place and keeps your nutrients. So that's one of my little hobbies is biochar. You basically turn something into charcoal, and charcoal's got this really cool micropore structure. So all of your nutrients get stuck in there and water, and then you got a place for your mushroom mycelia to kind of grow. So it becomes a really great substrate sponge. Yeah, it's a coral reef for soil. Yeah.
Is there a special technique to make the chart?
Yeah, I mean, some people use, after the concept where it probably came from is people like having their fire and then you pee on your fire at the end of the night to turn it out, and that there's a high amount of nitrogen in pee, and when you wet something that's burning, it also turns it more into slow charcoal, and then stuff started growing in those places, and then it was like, wow, let's do it on purpose. The more engineering ways, you get a chamber that's sealed from the actual flame, and you heat that up from below, and then it once you get up to about 400 Fahrenheit, it lets out all these gases, and then you can siphon out those gases and use it to burn, so it becomes this kind of cool reburn, and then after a while that just turns into it's just straight char. So you're kind of burning without oxygen is the key.
So what about the rocket stove?
Yeah.
You want to describe that a little bit?
Okay, yeah. Okay. Yeah,
That sounds pretty cool.
let me see.
We're at 6, everybody. 6:30, everybody. So if you
No. You could make a rocket stove. Or Maggie.
Yeah. You can't see very well, but the concept is that when you burn in an open fire, it's very inefficient, and you end up losing a lot of volatiles into the air. And so, if you kind of insulate the burn chamber, it becomes a really efficient burn. That heat gets resent back into the fire, and so you burn off all the other volatiles that normally go up. And so, with just a few sticks of wood here, once it gets going, it burns here, and then it goes up and heats whatever you want here.
So that's a platform on top.
Yeah, it's a little burn platform here. Here's like your pot of
solid?
beans. There's a pot of beans, and then there's a little hole that does an L shape in here. Does that make sense?
So is there an opening there?
Yeah, yeah. That's just a pot. Like,
Uh,
yeah. But yeah, it just goes in here and it goes up. So yeah, those work fantastic, and
You
you
can do tortillas and stuff like that. On it.
exactly. Yeah, yeah. I use it camping all the time and stuff like that.
Like make one.
Yeah, I have a little design of a garbage pail I turned into one. That's yeah, I will show you.
You know what the life expectancy is?
In El Salvador, a lot of my family are into their hundreds, and until recently, people are more getting like stomach cancers and stuff like that. But before, people lived a long time, and they smoked and drank and did all that stuff too. And
Do you have a problem with alcoholism down there? Similar to
yeah, there's definitely
in the Native American culture here, we have a problem with alcohol.
yeah, it's the same kind of thing. Where there's some genetic aspects that really, and there's sort of the depression aspect, right, of like not knowing that you'll never get out of poverty kind of thing. So this is my trash can rocket stove. So you can see this is like the good one here. So, it just has this little J tube, and then I insulate around it, and then you can kind of cook from the top. The Wi-Fi is not too great here. But yeah, no, I like to play with fire. I built I built an earthen oven in my house to sort of like recreate the family life back. This is part of the seating here. This is like earth bag seating, and then over here there's an earthen oven. But yeah, this little J tube goes in there and then comes out.
Have you ever thought about, or do you ever do like let's say you have a community garden here, if you would do a workshop there that people could pay to attend to learn how to make something like that?
Yeah.
As a fundraising for the village,
Oh, definitely, yeah. I'm always open for something.
part of it, you make one.
Yeah. No, I was gonna do one for. Yeah, the neat thing too is that the rocket stove turns into a little biochar maker too, because I have two. You put the garbage can lid back on it, and then you close the inlet with a little cap, and that cuts oxygen out, and that's really what you need to make charcoal. But the nice thing is you're burning something and you're done. You put the caps on it, you can carry it and move it, and you're not wasting that wood to. Because normally when you start a fire, you end up burning it down to ash because it's not easy to put it out. But using this little thing I have actually saves your wood and turns it into charcoal and you can reuse it. So it's kind of a nice little project. Oh, yeah. So that's the earthen oven. Yes, I like fire.
Was that an article in the paper? That picture looks familiar.
Yeah,
That's- I
Slow
read
Life
that.
magazine.
Yeah, that was tight.
Yeah.
I remember that. I remember your face. That was a great article.
Thank you.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
On that note, Rotary, we're a Rotary Club, Eco Rotary, and we have a model of the four-way test. And is it the truth? Is it fair to all concerned? Will it build goodwill and better friendships? Will it be beneficial to all concerned? It's like a program. that if everybody did, it would make the world better. And that's what Rotary is. We're trying to make the world better. And, from my experience and what I've seen from programs, being passionate about something, even though it's a long road ahead of you, is the most important thing to make change. And I just think we really deserve it.
Oh, thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks for having me.
Karina, ¿me puedes contar cómo es ese programa de permacultura aquí?
Bueno, el programa en sí es muy bonito porque es una motivación para la gente aprender cosas no nuevas, porque es la cultura ancestral la que nosotros comenzamos a mostrarle a la gente que practique. Pero nosotros evaluamos prácticamente nuestro trabajo casi a final de año, a ver cuáles son los resultados positivos que hemos tenido y qué es lo que realmente no nos ha ido muy bien. Y fue así como para esta gente que tenemos acá haciendo esta práctica de abono bocachi, fueron los líderes y lideresas que invitamos en el año 2009 a todas las comunidades de Suchitoto a través de sus ADESCOs. Las ADESCOs seleccionan a sus líderes y lideresas que son activamente en la comunidad.
¿Y qué es ADESCO?
ADESCO es una asociación de desarrollo comunal legalizados a través de las alcaldías municipales de cada municipio. Entonces estas ADESCOs adquieren el compromiso de seleccionar a sus líderes y lideresas y apoyarles en el desarrollo también de sus prácticas. Entonces es así como en Suchitoto logramos graduar 48 permacultores y permacultoras que hoy están ya haciendo prácticas y enseñando a más familias, así como también desarrollando sus propias parcelas demostrativas, ya que la permacultura lo que nos enseña es que nos enseña a optar nuevas prácticas, nos hace reaccionar en nuestra mente y nuestro corazón. Entonces, así como todas las personas cambian una forma de pensar y una forma de actuar. Entonces, y como vemos que la agricultura convencional cada vez se vuelve más complicada, más dañina al medio ambiente, a la salud, y los resultados son prácticamente negativos, entonces la gente cuando está viendo hoy ya en Suchitoto que la agricultura a través de las prácticas de permacultura es una agricultura que da confianza, que la gente la busca porque es orgánica, entonces más personas quieren hoy el curso de diseño.
¿Y cómo ha afectado el clima aquí, el cambio de clima? ¿Crees que ayuda a permacultura a gente?
Sí, bueno, en la permacultura consideramos que también tenemos como alternativas para lo que son los efectos del cambio climático. Y decimos esto con propiedad porque, bueno, acá en el terreno que estamos han pasado fenómenos, la tormenta Ida, el Stan y otros, en que como nuestro terreno está cubierto con plantas, con camote, con yuca y tiene una serie de cultivos en asocio, entonces en otros terrenos sin prácticas de permacultura ha habido erosiones y todo lo demás, pero en nuestro terreno no ha habido nada. Además de eso, no hemos perdido cantidad de cultivos. El año pasado lo que perdimos quizás en un 50% fueron los frijoles, pero realmente los demás cultivos los sacamos, porque nosotros promovemos un cultivo diverso, porque si con el efecto del cambio climático se nos daña la milpa o el frijol, queda la yuca, el camote, la caña, piña y otros productos para comer. Entonces consideramos que la permacultura ofrece alternativas porque promueve una agricultura sostenible, más sana y más sabia.
Entonces, contame más del programa. Los líderes vienen y ¿qué pasa?
Bueno, los líderes vienen y son 5 módulos, son 23 días a 26 días, depende cómo sea el nivel, digamos, de entusiasmo de la gente. Ellos vienen, aprenden un módulo, luego se van, lo practican y cuando vienen ya con su práctica, digamos, que han hecho en su parcela y vemos que todo viene bien, entonces comenzamos otro módulo. Y es como ir ladrillo tras ladrillo en una construcción y es así como ellos al final se empoderan y se vuelven primero líderes que vienen a practicar la permacultura, lo practican en su parcela, practican con otras familias y luego se vuelven instructores de la permacultura porque ya están, digamos, más apropiados del conocimiento.
Entonces vienen, dices, como 2 días al mes.
2 o 3 días al mes, es de acuerdo a la disponibilidad del tiempo de ellos como agricultores. Y también ¿por qué hacemos esto? Porque si hiciéramos un módulo tras otro, no hubiera la oportunidad de hacer prácticas y no quedaríamos convencidos nosotros, quizás como instructores de la permacultura, que lo que enseñamos fue captado o aprendido por nuestros líderes y lideresas, sino que es una forma como ir garantizando y comprobando que lo que están aprendiendo va a ser aplicado, y realmente pues es bastante maravilloso escuchar de la gente cómo es su arrepentimiento por no haber conocido la permacultura antes y cómo es su satisfacción ahora que ya la conocen.
Y ya uno de estos líderes están enseñando en sus propios
Sí,
campos, ¿sí?
sí, los que están acá ya todos están enseñando en sus comunidades, tienen grupos de 10, 20, 25 familias, como no en todas las comunidades la gente quiere aprender estos procesos, ¿no? Pero sí, ellos ya tienen sus grupos y están enseñando y desarrollando más parcelas. Lo bueno es que también han aprendido a compartir sus conocimientos, semillas y otras cosas que la gente pues eso lo ve bien, ya que acá en el, bueno, a nivel centroamericano lo que se han perdido son los valores. Entonces en la permacultura lo que hacemos es un recordatorio cómo era la vida de nuestros ancestros que utilizaban el método del trueque, el intercambio, la solidaridad. Entonces ahora ellos buscan esa parte de ser más hermanados, a trabajar juntos, y eso es lo que realmente en la permacultura tiene sus grandes resultados.
Sí, sí, qué bonito. Y la gente que empiezan a enseñar ya cuando salen del programa o durante el programa están enseñando.
Durante el programa
Sí.
comienzan a enseñar un poco temerosos,
Sí, sí.
y acompañados por nuestros promotores, pero después del programa se van solos.
Y después del programa hay otros soportes que les pueden dar que se reúnen a vez en cuando.
Sí, bueno, el caso de los promotores que están ahorita, le llamamos promotores comunales, y están ellos como un equipo aprendiz. Lo tenemos como aprendiz porque ellos acá lo que estamos haciendo es perfeccionándoles en todas las prácticas para que en un momento se vuelvan realmente unos instructores de la permacultura. Porque tenemos como dos niveles, de promotor comunal a promotor institucional, y ya un instructor meramente de la permacultura. Entonces es de acuerdo a su capacidad de aprendizaje, compartir con la gente, apropiarse del conocimiento y desarrollar todos los módulos, por decir algo. Entonces que ya en un momento ya los enviamos, incluso estamos ya vendiendo consultoría y ellos son los que van a desarrollar.
Okay. Y así les da otro ingreso, ¿no? Que pueden consultar y pueden empezar así.
Sí, sí. Bueno, nosotros continuamos siempre con el apoyo técnico de ellos, ya que consideramos que en la permacultura nunca se deja de aprender. Siempre, todos los días hay que aprender, hay que experimentar, y es así como el equipo siempre permanece, digamos, como en ese continuo aprendizaje, empoderándose, ellos compartiendo su experiencia. Y si van a una comunidad y allá escuchan de una práctica que es buena, entonces venimos, la implementamos en el terreno y fortalecemos estas capacidades.
Qué bueno. Bueno, muchas gracias, Reina.
Bueno, Roberto, estamos a la orden acá en el terreno.